The ISS Valkyrie was never meant to break the wall. For centuries, the Galactic Wall had stood as an impassable boundary, an invisible, unbreakable barrier that marked the edge of known space. No species dared to cross it. No probes returned from the other side. Even the most powerful empires of the galaxy whispered of its horrors, treating it as a divine threshold never to be violated. But humans never did well with boundaries. Commander Adrian Kyne stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, hands clasped behind his back as the final countdown began. The ship was a testament to human ingenuity, an experimental warship reinforced with cutting-edge technology, built for the sole purpose of answering the one question that had haunted humanity for generations. What lies beyond? "All systems green," came the voice of Chief Engineer Kira Vasquez. "The resonance drive is stable, no anomalies." Kyne nodded. "Then this is it." He glanced at the viewing screen where the Galactic Wall loomed ahead. It wasn't a structure in the traditional sense, no towering fortifications, no metallic barrier. It was a distortion in space itself, a shimmering, churning vortex of unknown energy stretching endlessly in all directions. It exuded an unnatural stillness, as though the universe itself ended here. "1 minute to impact," said Lieutenant Omar Patel. His voice was steady, but his hands twitched over his console. Everyone had heard the legends. The wall didn't let anything through, it didn't just repel, it erased. But the Valkyrie was built differently. Human scientists had spent decades studying the wall's frequency, deciphering its strange energy signatures. They believed, hoped, that their new resonance drive could break through where all others had failed. "Commander, are we really doing this?" Vasquez asked, her voice softer now. Kyne met her eyes. He understood her fear. This wasn't just a mission, it was a leap into the unknown, the kind of insanity that defined human history. They had always been the species to push past limits, to spit in the face of danger. But sometimes that arrogance led to catastrophe. "We came all this way," he said. "We finish what we started." Silence fell, then 5 seconds later, Patel called out. The Valkyrie surged forward. A blinding light consumed the ship as it met the wall, energy crackling around them, alarms blaring in protest. The ship shuddered, metal groaning as if resisting the sheer force of existence itself. And then they were through. The bridge fell into eerie silence. The crew blinked at their screens. The turbulence was gone. The ship was intact. But the universe around them was wrong. Kyne's breath hitched as he gazed at the screen. The stars had changed. They weren't simply shifted, they were different. Twisted constellations, unnatural spirals of glowing nebulae, and worst of all, a looming monolithic shape in the distance, an enormous structure drifting in the void like the corpse of a god. And then came the sound. A deep, reverberating hum filled the air, sinking into their bones. It wasn't from the ship. It wasn't from their palms. It was coming from outside. Something had noticed them, something beyond the wall. The hum grew louder. It wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that pressed into them, seeping into their bones, rattling their skulls. The bridge lights flickered, and for a split second, the walls of the Valkyrie seemed to stretch and contract, as if reality itself was breathing. "Status report," Kyne barked, shaking off the nausea twisting his stomach. "All systems still functional," Vasquez said, her fingers flying over her console. "But Commander, I don't know what the hell we're looking at out there." She wasn't the only one. Every screen on the bridge showed the same view, an impossible landscape of alien stars glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. The massive monolithic structure in the distance loomed over everything like an ancient sentinel. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that something was moving. At first, it was barely noticeable, a ripple in the void, like light bending around an unseen force. Then shadows slithered between the stars, shifting in ways that made no sense, shapes that had no form yet felt alive. "Detecting something," Patel murmured, his hands trembling. "No, many somethings. They're not on any known spectrum. It's like they're outside normal space." Kyne's jaw tightened. "Weapon status." "Online," Patel confirmed. "But sir, I don't know if our weapons will even work here." That was the terrifying truth. The Valkyrie was built for war, but it had never been meant to fight this. The hum deepened. The entire ship groaned in response, metal straining as though unseen hands were pressing against its hull. Then a voice, not spoken, not heard, bypassed the ears and slammed directly into their minds. "You are not supposed to be here." The crew recoiled. Patel let out a strangled gasp. Vasquez clutched her head, her face contorted in pain. Kine gritted his teeth, fighting against the overwhelming pressure in his skull. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, vast, endless, wrong. Kine forced himself to speak, though his voice felt small in the face of something so limitless. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" Silence, then the shadows stirred. The monolithic structure in the distance shifted, a deep, gut-wrenching sensation of movement not through space but through something else. Then another message, "Turn back." Kine swallowed hard. The wall was supposed to be a mystery, a boundary, a challenge to be overcome. But now, for the first time, a question slithered into his mind. Had the wall been built to keep them out or to keep something else in? "Commander," Vasquez whispered, "I think we're in serious trouble." The ship's lights flickered again. The shadows surrounding them twitched like a nest of awakening predators. And then the Valkyrie's sensors screamed in alarm. Something was coming, something vast, something that had noticed them. The Valkyrie's alarms howled, filling the bridge with a shrill, panicked wail. The movement in the void had become unmistakable. Something was closing in. "Multiple contacts," Patel's voice cracked as he stared at his screen. I can't get a solid reading, but they're big, bigger than anything we've ever seen." Kine's pulse pounded. His instinct screamed to turn and run, but every sensor, every readout made one thing horrifyingly clear. There was nowhere to run. The space beyond the wall didn't obey the same rules. The stars were wrong. The distances didn't make sense. And the things moving toward them, they weren't ships. They weren't even solid. They were watching. "Power up the resonance drive," Kine ordered. "If we need to punch out, I want that thing ready to go." Vasquez's fingers flew across her console. "I'm trying, but something's interfering with the drive. It's like the laws of physics are," she exhaled sharply, "breaking down around us." The hum in the air thickened, pressing against their skulls. Kine clenched his jaw, pushing past the pain. The voice returned, "You were warned." The shadows lunged. The Valkyrie shook violently as an invisible force crashed against it. The screens flickered, distorting into impossible patterns. The crew screamed as their bodies were pulled in multiple directions at once, stretched between the fabric of existence and something else. "Shields failing," Patel shouted. Kine didn't hesitate. "Fire everything full spread." The bridge lights flared red as the Valkyrie's weapons roared to life. Rail guns spat slugs of hyperdense metal. Plasma cannons erupted in fiery arcs. Missiles streaked into the void, locking onto nothing, and then impact. The shadows reacted the moment the first shot landed. A terrible, piercing screech tore through the ship. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a presence of rage, of something old and hungry. The void writhed and the shadows struck back. An unseen force slammed into the Valkyrie, sending it spiraling. The artificial gravity flickered, and for a moment Kine felt himself lifted outside his body, staring into something far, far larger than himself. A shape, a city of twisting, writhing towers stretching beyond infinity, a place that was alive, a place that had been waiting. And in the heart of it, something turned its gaze upon him. Kine crashed back into his seat with a ragged gasp. The vision vanished, but the dread remained. "We have to leave," Vasquez screamed. "Resonance drive at 60%, I'm forcing a bypass." The ship groaned as another impact rocked it. Patel clung to his console, his face pale with terror. "They're getting closer, Commander." Kine's fists clenched. His body wanted to shake. His instinct screamed to panic, but he forced himself to stay steady. "Vasquez," he said, his voice like steel, "whatever it takes, get us out of here." Outside, the void shifted. The monolithic structure in the distance was no longer distant. It was moving, and it was reaching for them. The Valkyrie shuddered under another unseen impact, the force rippling through its reinforced hull like a hammer striking glass. Kine's grip on his chair tightened as he scanned the distorted readings on the display. The sensors were useless, constantly shifting, unable to make sense of whatever was out there. The only thing they knew for sure was that something vast and wrong was closing in. "Resonance drive at 70%, Vasquez yelled over the alarms. Sweat glistened on her brow as she frantically rerouted power, bypassing safety protocols and redlining the system. "I can force an early activation, but—" She didn't finish her sentence because at that moment the Valkyrie lurched, not forward, not backward, but sideways, as if space itself had grabbed the ship and dragged it. Kine felt the pull deep in his gut, a nauseating sensation of being unstuck from reality. His vision blurred momentarily, flickering between what he knew to be real and something else entirely. a glimpse of a city not built but grown. Towering, spiraling structures of blackened material shifting and pulsating as if breathing. Rivers of liquid light coursing between them, feeding into vast, towering obelisks. The sky was not a sky but a churning mass of eyes, impossible, uncountable, staring in all directions at once. And then a presence. It saw him, not just him, but humanity. A wave of understanding flooded his mind, a warning, a punishment, a question, and then a choice. Kine gasped as reality snapped back. He was in his chair again. The bridge was still there, his crew alive, though barely holding on. Vasquez coughed and wiped blood from her nose. "Commander, we're losing structural integrity. Whatever this place is, it's trying to keep us here." Kine didn't need a scientist to tell him that. He could feel it. The more they resisted, the more the space around them tightened, pulling them deeper. "Patel," Kine barked, his voice like iron. "Weapons now, I don't care if you can't see a target. Fire everything at maximum yield." Patel's hands flew over the controls. "Commander, firing now." The Valkyrie unleashed hell. Rail guns roared, their slugs vanishing into the distorted void. Plasma lances cut through the darkness, striking something. The shadows convulsed, writhing in response to the assault. The deep hum that had plagued them since their arrival wavered, flickering between frequencies like a wounded animal howling in agony. And then, for the first time, the shadows screamed. The force of it was indescribable, not sound, not light, but meaning. It spoke directly into their existence, a raw and primal command that resonated in every molecule of their being. "You will not leave." The ship twisted violently. Bulkheads groaned. Consoles exploded in a shower of sparks that rained across the bridge as the artificial gravity failed for a fraction of a second. Kine slammed against his restraints, gritting his teeth against the suffocating weight of the entity's presence pressing down upon them. Vasquez's hands flew across the console. "Resonance drive at 95%. We're almost there, just hold on." Kine's mind raced. They had seconds, maybe less. Whatever was beyond the wall, it wasn't just alive, it wasn't just watching, it was waiting. And now that they had come, it wouldn't let them go without a price. "Patel," Kine grunted. "Fire again, everything now." "Sir, we're barely holding on." Patel slammed his palm onto the controls. The Valkyrie roared. Every remaining weapon system fired at once, missiles, rail guns, plasma bursts, kinetic rounds. The void erupted in a storm of fury, the impact sending ripples through the shadows. And then a breach. For a split second, the Valkyrie sensors detected something real. A distortion, a weak point in whatever force held them. Kine didn't hesitate. "Vasquez," he roared, "punch it." Vasquez slammed the command key. The Valkyrie's engine screamed as the resonance drive activated at full force. A shock wave of energy blasted outward, tearing through the unnatural gravity pulling them down. The ship shuddered, its hull groaning as it pushed past the threshold. The last thing Kine saw before the ship ripped free was the city moving, not crumbling, not falling. Advancing, reaching. The Valkyrie surged forward, space folding around it as the resonance drive punched them back toward the wall. The distorted reality blurred, and then in an instant, they were through. Silence, the Valkyrie hung in the void, its systems flickering, stabilizing. The stars were right again. The galaxy, their galaxy, stretched before them. They had escaped. But the hum, it was still there. Quieter, fainter, but no longer coming from outside. It was coming from within the ship. Kine closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. They had broken the wall, but something had followed them through. The Valkyrie floated in the familiar vastness of space, but something was wrong. Kine sat rigid in his command chair, his breath coming in slow, controlled pulls. The hum, the ever-present, suffocating hum, was no longer outside. It vibrated within the walls of the ship like a second heartbeat, thrumming beneath the metal. Vasquez wiped sweat and blood from her forehead, checking the status of their location. "We're back," she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "Confirmed," Patel said. "We've crossed the wall." He let out a heavy breath, sagging over his console. "Jesus," he muttered. "I thought we were done for." They should have felt relief. They had survived the unknowable, fought their way back into real space. The mission, for all its failures, had accomplished the impossible, but no one relaxed because something was still here. "Talk to me," Kine ordered, keeping his voice steady. "Systems report." Patel's fingers danced across his console, his eyes darting nervously over the data. No major hull breaches, no critical failures, engine strained but operational, he said. Resonance drive is fried, though. We won't be making another jump like that anytime soon. Vasquez frowned. Life support is running nominal, but... She hesitated. But what? Kine turned to her sharply. Atmospheric readings are fluctuating, sir. Barely noticeable, but it's like something's interfering with our oxygen levels. Kine's stomach tightened. Radiation. She shook her head. No. A new silence settled over the bridge. The crew felt it now, the lingering, crawling sensation beneath their skin. The hum was subtle, but now that they knew it was there, it felt invasive. Kine switched the comms to shipwide. All hands, report any unusual activity immediately, he ordered. That includes auditory or visual hallucinations, unexpected power fluctuations, or... A sudden clatter. A noise echoed from behind him. Everyone turned. Patel's tablet had fallen to the floor. It slid backward against the natural gravity of the ship. A breath of cold air brushed past Kine's cheek. "Commander, something's in here," Vasquez whispered. Kine was already on his feet. "Arm yourselves now." The bridge crew scrambled, retrieving weapons from the emergency lockers. The standard-issue sidearms were designed for boarding conflicts, but Kine had the terrible feeling they would be useless against whatever had followed them back. The lights flickered, and then the whisper, not sound, not words, but a presence speaking into their minds. "You brought us home." Kine's grip tightened on his weapon, his breath came slow and measured. "Show yourself." The air rippled. A shape flickered in the periphery of their vision. No solid form, no recognizable features, just a disturbance. The hum deepened, pressing into their skulls. Then the security alarm screamed. "Containment breach detected in medbay," the ship's AI blared. Kine's heart slammed against his ribs. "Vasquez with me, Patel hold the bridge." They moved fast, weapons raised, sprinting down the corridor. The emergency lights strobed, casting jagged shadows along the walls. The hum grew louder as they neared the medbay. Kine reached for the door panel, and it opened before he touched it. Inside, the room was dark, cold. The hum vibrated through the medical equipment, and in the center a figure stood. It was human, or it had been. The thing turned. The light caught its features, sunken eyes, too wide pupils, skin stretched too tightly over its face. Its uniform was standard-issue Valkyrie crew attire, but wrong, as if it had been molded over the body instead of worn. Kine recognized him instantly. Private Ali O'Malley had died in the initial breach. His body had been vaporized when the hull collapsed, and yet here he stood, smiling. His mouth moved, but his voice did not match. It was layered, distorted, echoing with something else. "We are here. We are many." The hum rose into a piercing screech. The lights died, and all around them the air moved. The darkness swallowed them whole. Kine's breath came in slow, controlled pulls as his eyes adjusted to the medbay's dim emergency lights. Vasquez stood beside him, weapon raised, her knuckles white around the grip. The thing that had been Ali stood in front of them, still smiling, its empty eyes fixed on Kine. "The hum isn't just in the walls anymore," Kine said. "It's in the air, in our bones." "Private," Kine said carefully, keeping his gun steady. "You're supposed to be dead." Ali's mouth twitched, stretching too wide. He replied, his voice layered with a chorus of whispers. "But the wall, it does not let go so easily." The emergency lights flickered again. Behind Ali, the air moved, shifted. Shapes slithered through the shadows, their outlines barely perceptible. Kine's instincts screamed at him to run, but he stood his ground. Vasquez inhaled sharply. "Commander, this isn't just one of them." Kine nodded. Ali's body was just a doorway. Something else was coming through. Kine steadied his voice. "You shouldn't be here." Ali tilted his head, that wrong smile still etched across his face. "Neither should you." His pupils dilated, expanding unnaturally until they consumed his irises. "We were waiting for so long, and then you opened the way." The hum spiked. The room shook. Vasquez fired. The shot was dead on. A plasma round burned a hole straight through Ali's chest. He didn't fall. He barely even reacted. The wound sizzled, but instead of bleeding, it spread, dark tendrils unraveling from the edges, curling outward as if tasting the air. Ali laughed, the sounds scraping against their eardrums like static. Then he took a step forward. Kine's instincts kicked in. Fall back. He and Vasquez sprinted for the door as the medbay erupted into chaos. The shadows lunged, writhing across the floor, reaching with jagged, finger-like tendrils. Kine dove through the doorway as Vasquez slammed the emergency lockdown. The reinforced blast door sealed shut just as something slammed into it from the other side. Kine stumbled back, his chest heaving. Vasquez stood beside him, weapon trembling in her grip. The medbay speakers crackled, then Ali's voice whispered through the ship, "Let us in." The lights overhead burst, plunging the corridor into flickering red. And from the walls, the humming grew louder. Back on the bridge, Patel's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander, what the hell is going on?" Kine took a breath. Medbay's compromised. He forced himself to stay calm. "We've got something wearing O'Malley's face." A pause, then Patel's voice came back, lower, uncertain. "Sir, we may have another problem." Kine's stomach clenched. "What kind of problem?" Another pause. "We just got an incoming transmission." Kine and Vasquez exchanged a glance. "From who?" Patel's voice came back almost as a whisper. "From us." The blood drained from Kine's face. "Repeat that." Patel swallowed. "Sir, we're receiving a distress signal from the Valkyrie." Kine's grip tightened around his weapon. "That's not possible." The comms buzzed. Patel's voice was shaky now. "It's on all frequencies. The signature is a 100% match. It's us, Commander." A sharp inhale. "And sir, it's begging for help." The hum rose again, deep and crawling, and now it was whispering their names. The distress signal didn't stop, even as Kine and Vasquez ran back to the bridge. The eerie broadcast played on every available frequency. It was their ship, their voices, and yet, "Please! We don't have much time. It followed us. We never should have gone beyond the wall. Oh God, they're already inside." The message cut off, then it looped. Kine's heart pounded in his chest. Vasquez ran beside him, eyes darting toward every shadow as they moved through the dimly lit corridors. The hum was no longer just beneath the walls. It moved with them now, slithering through the air, pressing against their minds. They reached the bridge and sealed the doors behind them. Patel was at his station, pale-faced, his hands gripping the console like a lifeline. It's been playing on repeat, Commander," he muttered. "It's us, but it can't be us." Kine exhaled sharply. "Play it again." Patel hesitated, then he pressed the control. The transmission buzzed back to life. "This is the Valkyrie requesting immediate assistance. Kine's breath hitched. He heard his own voice. It was him, panicked, desperate. "We breached the wall. Something followed us back." Then another voice, a garbled, half-human shriek, interrupted. Then silence. Kine's stomach turned to ice. "That's impossible. That's not us." Vasquez's voice was tight. "Commander, what if it is?" The thought was too much. Kine shook his head. "No, we're here. This is real." Patel swallowed hard. "Then what the hell is sending that signal?" Silence fell over the bridge, and then a new message crackled over the comms. "You shouldn't have come back." It wasn't a recording, it was live. The lights flickered, the screens distorted. The hum inside the ship turned into a guttural, bone-rattling vibration. Vasquez spun toward Patel. "Cut the signal now." Patel's hands flew over the controls. "I'm trying." His fingers hovered over the interface, but it wasn't responding. The screens warped, the text shifted into incomprehensible symbols. And then a video feed activated. The bridge crew froze. The screen showed another bridge, identical, same consoles, same layout, same emergency lights flickering overhead. And standing in the center were them. Kine's breath locked in his throat. He saw himself standing in the same uniform, eyes wide with terror. Patel was at the same station, fingers hovering over a broken console. Vasquez stood beside them, weapon raised. It was the Valkyrie, but not this one. The other Kine looked straight into the camera, and then the thing stepped forward. It wasn't human, not entirely. It wore a uniform that resembled a UES officer's attire, but it clung wrong, like a second skin stretched over something else. Its eyes were black voids, its mouth too wide, its hands too long. It moved like it remembered being human. It stood behind the other Kine, its fingers resting on his shoulders like a puppeteer. And as Kine and his crew watched in horror, the thing on the screen grinned. The transmission cut and the ship lurched. A deep, grinding sound echoed through the hull like metal bending under impossible force. The hum swelled, becoming a deafening roar. The emergency lights died, leaving only the dim glow of the consoles. Then the whispers started inside the bridge. Kine turned sharply. The shadows in the corners of the room had grown thicker, moving, shifting, forming shapes. A voice spoke behind him, his own voice. "You brought us home." Kyne's blood turned to ice. They weren't alone anymore. The ship was breaking apart. Not in a physical way, there were no hull breaches, no alarms blaring about catastrophic failure, but the Valkyrie was still coming undone. The whispers in the walls were everywhere now, crawling beneath the crew's skin, settling inside their thoughts like parasites. The lights flickered wildly, casting twisting shadows that never quite matched their movements. And worst of all, the other crew was inside. Kyne's heart pounded as he turned in slow horror. They stood at the far end of the bridge, copies of himself, Vasquez, Patel, and the others, but they were wrong. Their uniforms were faded like old photographs. Their eyes were hollow. Their mouths just a little too wide, and when they moved, it was with a delay, like a memory struggling to stay real. The other Kyne smiled. "You shouldn't have come back." Kyne's grip tightened around his sidearm. "You're not real." The thing wearing his face cocked its head. "Neither are you. We were waiting for so long, and then you opened the way." The words slammed into Kyne's skull with an almost physical force. His vision wavered. For half a second, he wasn't standing on the Valkyrie's bridge anymore. He was floating, surrounded by endless black, no ship, no crew, just void. A whisper curled around his ear. "You left us behind." He blinked, snapping back to reality. Vasquez's voice cut through the haze. "Commander." The others were moving now, stepping towards them in eerie synchronization. Kyne fired. The plasma shot ripped straight through his doppelganger's chest. It did nothing. The thing wearing his face took another step forward, smiling wider. Vasquez didn't wait. She grabbed Patel and pulled him towards the emergency override panel. "We need to get out of here now." Kyne backed up, his mind racing. "Where's the real ship?" Patel's voice was panicked. "What if this is the real ship? What if that was the trick? That was the trap? The Valkyrie had shattered the wall, and now it was inside the fracture." Kyne forced himself to think. If this place was an echo, if it was just a loop, then there had to be a way to break it. The thing wearing his face was almost close enough to touch now. Kyne made a split-second decision. "Brace!" He slammed his fist onto the emergency purge controls. A warning siren blared. The ship's core overloaded and the Valkyrie fell. The sensation was indescribable. It wasn't like entering warp where space bent and twisted in familiar ways. This was deeper. The universe itself ripped apart. The ship tore free from the wall's grasp, plunging into something else. And then silence. Kyne gasped, sucking in breath as if he'd been drowning. The hum was gone. The lights were normal. The ship system stabilized. Vasquez groaned, pushing herself up from the floor. What the hell just happened? Kyne turned towards the view screen. The wall was behind them now, distant and silent. No whispers, no shadows, just a great, empty void stretching beyond human comprehension. Patel checked the readings. "Sir, we're back. We're in known space." His voice was shaking. "We made it." Kyne exhaled. "Status check." Vasquez tapped at her wrist console. "All hands accounted for." Patel hesitated, then his face paled. "Not all." Kyne's stomach dropped. "What?" Patel swallowed hard. We have one extra crew member." Kyne's blood ran cold. They turned, and at the far end of the bridge, standing perfectly still, was a figure. It was wearing a Valkyrie uniform, but its face was missing. The lights flickered, and the hum started again. Kyne sat in his quarters, staring at the single sheet of paper on his desk, the incident report. He was supposed to fill it out, explain what had happened beyond the wall, detail the breach, the encounter, the thing they had brought back with them. But how could he put it into words? How could he describe the way reality itself had twisted around them, the way the Valkyrie had been copied, consumed, replaced? How could he explain that something was still here? The hum had returned, faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Vasquez had noticed it too. She hadn't spoken much since they returned, but her eyes were constantly moving, scanning the corridors, watching the shadows. Patel had buried himself in his work, checking sensor logs over and over as if the numbers might change and tell him something different. The extra crew member was never found. No log showed when or where they had come aboard, no records of their face, their name. And yet the ship's manifest was clear. The Valkyrie had one extra soul. Kyne exhaled, rubbing his temples. He had considered filing an emergency quarantine request when they returned to human space, considered turning the ship over to higher authorities, scientists, investigators, anyone who might understand what had happened. But something inside him stopped him. A feeling, a whisper. A part of him knew that if they drew too much attention to what had happened, if they let others start looking too closely, the thing might not like that. Kine picked up his pen. He wrote a single sentence on the report. No anomalies detected. Mission success. Returning to port. He stared at the words, and then somewhere in the room something shifted. The lights flickered. The hum grew louder, and behind him a shadow moved.